Greetings, brothers and sisters. Welcome to the weekly Mormon News Roundup. I am your humble host, D-Baze. That is Talent on loan from Kolob. This is episode 176, and it is Sunday, September 7th, 2025. We will be ruminating on the great and spacious VI. So thanks so much for joining us to discuss the contemporary issues in Mormonism. We have a big episode on hand, and I'm coming to you from the crossroads of the East, Washington, D.C., where the truth runs free. But before we jump into our episodes, I'd like to welcome my fabulous co-host Ryan Josiah. Ryan, how's it going?
Yeah, good. I'm glad to be here. It's not my first time, and it's fun. It's always fun to join your podcast.
Well, thank you so much. I saw that you were on She Became Visible with Renee Steelman just a little while ago. What did you guys discuss there?
I don't think it's technically posted as of this recording, so we will talk about in the near future. Mostly my story is what we talked about for the most part, since I've been on your podcast here, but I haven't been on anything else, and I haven't had like an extended time to just tell my story. So she just asked me a lot of questions about myself and my TikTok and my evolution into being gay Jesus and all that.
Yeah, absolutely. We always have the inside scoops here on the Mormon News Roundup. We know things before they even happen, so that's what makes this program really, really great. And this is what we will be discussing today. We have a big episode on tap for you. There is a lot of ex-Mormon TikTok drama. How do you like that thumbnail? First of all, that's a solid thumbnail. What do you think?
That's pretty good. That's reflective of the current attitudes online right now.
I think so. Actually, my wife took a look at that. She said it was too busy, had too many doodads, too many things going on in it. But this is my cup of tea here. We will be discussing our number one episode, or number one issue for this week was a big article that came out of the Wall Street Journal with one Alyssa Grenfell, the juggernaut of ex-Mormonism, probably one of the biggest voices out there. We will get into that as our featured news article at the end of the show. But before we do that, we're going to jump in, and there's a new documentary that has been released in a number of parts here called An Inconvenient Faith. Now, Ryan, are you familiar with the new documentary? It's in several parts here, and it features a number of individuals, including Jim Bennett, Patrick Mason, John DeLynn, Bill Reel, and it discusses some of the intricacies of Mormonism. Have you watched some of that?
I have not had a chance to watch it. I've seen little clips online here and there, and it looks like they were very thorough. It looks like it's going to be a very interesting watch because of all the different voices and different perspectives, both within and outside of the church.
Yeah, it seems to be pretty popular here, and I've got one person out there, Sarah Hale here, who's going to be talking about this. I really hope this is received in the intention I meant as humanly possible. Knowing social media, though, I know someone will be upset one way or the other because I want to keep this a positive post for anyone of any beliefs. I will be deleting negative comments. I love you. She's going to be reacting to that latest documentary on Mormons and ex-Mormons here called An Inconvenient Faith. Let's see what she's got going on.
Watching this new podcast called An Inconvenient Faith. It's made me feel like I've gotten nothing done today because I've just been listening to one episode after the next. If you don't know this about me, I am Mormon, or also known as the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And though I am proud to be a part of my religion, I am also a thinker. So I have thoroughly enjoyed this podcast because honestly, just going through every single hard thing in our religion, I have cried like the whole day. I'm deeply empathetic, so even if I don't relate to a specific issue myself, I feel it in my core. It's a big deal to me. I feel like a lot of people that have left the church or are against it just think that people that stay are ignorant or don't care about them, and that is just so far from the truth for someone like me, at the very least. As I'm listening to this, I'm like, the only way that some of these things are going to change is if people like me that are able to see the issues can try to be the change. Because trust me, there have been times I have almost left. Those are completely different stories, but like, I really am a thinker. These things do not just go over my head. And unfortunately, when I'm in those moments, or fortunately, depending on how you want to look at it, there are things that I just believe. I believe in God. I believe in a merciful Jesus, and I really do stand by Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints having the most merciful version of Jesus or beliefs in afterlife. That is not to undermine any of the things that are hard about it, because like I said, I'm aware, I'm listening to this, I'm crying. It's hard for me. It's hard for me, as I think it should be. I think if it's, honestly, maybe this is too hot of a take for just a TikTok or an Instagram post, but if it's not hard for someone, I wonder how. I really like this podcast so far, though there have been moments where I'm like, it doesn't resolve that issue for me. There have been moments where the podcast being called An Inconvenient Faith is talking about the fact there are things that aren't okay. And this isn't going to make sense to everyone. I expect that a lot of people are going to be even bugged that I'm saying this, but for me, that's part of it. I just don't imagine that there is any such thing as a perfect religion or a perfect church. And if I am going to believe in God, and I am going to believe in God, even if I leave the church, I can't do life without God personally. But if that is the case, and he does believe in agency, these inconvenient or hard things are allowed to happen, but it doesn't mean they're right to me. It does not mean that I agree, especially as a feminist. There's a lot that I disagree with. The thing I'm enjoying so far, though, is that they're not sugarcoating it, that they're not like, oh yeah, the issues with da-da-da. They like go into what the issue is and explain what's wrong about it. They're interviewing the guy who wrote the CES letters. That's the other thing that's cool about it. We get to hear his perspectives. And the thing that I appreciate about it, he's actually being fairly respectful of anyone that has decided to stay in the church. And the people within the church are being respectful of him and his decisions to leave. One of my favorite quotes from it so far was something along the lines of, everyone's just trying their best to be a good person. If someone feels they need to leave, then that's what they need to do. And if someone feels they need to stay, then that's what they need to do. I couldn't agree more with that. I've said this before, but even though all morning I've been watching this new podcast called
Okay, it seemed like I got cut off there just a little touch. So first of all, it seems like this documentary here, An Inconvenient Faith, which is, I believe, in 9 parts so far that has been released. I think that's the totality of it. Seems like it has been well received from, as we saw here, from a believer and also from non-believers as well. It seems to be trying to bridge the divide between ex-Mormons and Mormons, which is a really, really tough bridge to cross, as we're going to discuss a little bit later on with the Wall Street Journal article. But what is your reaction to what she was talking about here, Ryan? How do you feel about her nuance level?
I was gonna say she is quite nuanced. There is a lot that could be said about what she said in that one clip, but what striked me the most is when she first had to specify that she's a thinker, as if that's not normal with Mormons, because she knows that to some extent it's not. You kind of have to just say, I'm just going to set these things aside and just believe and not think about it. But she's willing to just face things head on and think about it. And then she starts to say that there's this misconception: Mormons are actually thinkers, or actually at least people like me. She stops and kind of corrects herself, because she recognizes that she is not the average Mormon. The average Mormon is not willing to go into all of the details and things that she apparently has been. And actually, the other thing that strikes me I want to bring up is how she said that she seems surprised that Jeremy Reynolds, the author of CES Letter, is, what word did she use? Compassionate, or towards those who choose to stay in the church. And that was a little surprising to me, because if you get to know the biggest voices, not all of them, but some of the biggest voices within the ex-Mormon world, they are critical of the church itself and church leaders, but super compassionate and understanding and patient with church members themselves. We don't fault church members, and that's not at all what we criticize in our videos. It seems like,
Yeah, very rarely are you going to criticize an average member of the church. Occasionally, people with large social media platforms, if you put yourself out there and you have, in my opinion, bad ideas, I think they're ripe for criticism. But the everyday average member, I don't think is something that needs to be criticized on on any regular basis. I do think that the reason I now that I've watched this, Ryan, I think the reason that I haven't gone viral is that I haven't done those makeup videos. You know, that seems to be the thing. If you can put the makeup on, you really turbocharges you. I may need to look into that. What do you think?
I think it could be beneficial to just at least smooth out your tone just a little
Okay,
bit.
I think that seems wise here. Okay, now another viral video that came out this week was from Anthony Ambrose here. Talks about how he has been given insider information into Mormonism. And this actually went really, really viral this week. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints released a guide to help members not seem weird, but seem cool. There's been a lot of reactions to this too. Let's check this one out too.
Because of my profession and the clients that I have, I often get to see things before the general public. And one of those things is this church communication guide for local units, how we communicate as disciples of Jesus Christ from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. It's a guide to help members have a unified voice in the terminologies that they use as members of the church. Now, I am no longer a member of this church. I removed my records, and I was a member for 22 years of my life, all of them being my adult years, all right? And so I left just a few years ago. I still work in this space in order to communicate policy change, historical accuracy, and to, just help members who are still trying to strive to be better or hope that the church can change in how they approach certain policies or doctrine or whatever it may be. Now, with all that said, this guide is oddly specific and just sort of strange and weird. So when it goes to the section of our voice, which, by the way, this guide is going to be presented to members as training so that they can understand how to speak like members of the church in a way that they're perceived not to ostracize or be weird or be considered weird by others. Let's talk about it, right? Okay, so it says on section 3, it says our voice. Considerations and alternatives for church-specific words. We sometimes use words or jargon that may convey meaning within the church culture, but can be misunderstood by others. Makes sense. Yeah, that's nice, right? Use words that are simple, clear, and doctrinally correct. This list clarifies some common use terms. You can find additional terms and alternatives at guide.churchofjesuschrist.org. So you can go there and find a guide of sorts that can help you as well. The ones that stood out to me and the words or terms that the church uses, right, versus the consideration alternatives are wild to me, okay? So for convert, like in the church, they used to use the term convert. They now say, consider using new member of the church. All right, simple, not too crazy. Now for fellowshipping a possible new member, so to say, they recommend using the term or the noun friendship, and as a verb, consider to get to know, become friends with, or associate with. So instead of saying we're going to go fellowship someone, they're going to say, let's go get to know, let's go become friends with, or associate with. Now, if you take this into consideration here, the term fellowship to then replace it by let's go become friends, let's go get to know so-and-so, is starting to feel a little odd. Because now if we go look at the term non-member, what that means, like that was the term that they used to use, non-member, they say this term can sound negative and exclusive. Consider instead using all people, God's children, people of other faiths, friends, and so on. You see where I'm getting at here? Like this is, they have the term inactive, right? That is a very common term within the church. They're saying to change it because it says, be cautious about categorizing people. If necessary, consider using less engaged church members. So instead of saying, oh, this member is inactive, say he's less engaged. He's a less engaged church member. People who don't currently participate in church activities and so on. Man, that is a mouthful. My family is less engaged or doesn't currently participate in church activities. Yeah, okay. There's a lot going on here, and I just had to say something about it because it's for investigator, which was a very common term when I was a missionary, and I always kept hearing like we should stop using the term investigator. Here it says the term investigator may feel impersonal. Well, yeah, and in some cases it may imply secrecy or government action. Consider visitor, neighbor, friend, and so on.
That's all he's got. Now, real quick question, Ryan. Is there anything wrong with trying to speak with a more inclusive voice. I mean, I want to be inclusive in the way that I want to speak. Is there anything wrong with the church trying to control the narrative?
Oh, I feel like that was two different questions because I don't think there's anything wrong with trying to use more generally understood terms like investigator is I've always thought that was kind of weird even back when I was a missionary. Like, why do we use the term investigator? Because anyone outside of Mormonism has no idea what an investigator is. So some of them kind of make sense, but controlling the narrative is a little different. I find it funny that the church is so interested in controlling the narrative instead of doing good for people to use their resources to make the world a better place. They're so focused on their image, and I think they're kind of making it worse in the long run.
This really, I don't like the term less engaged church member. It used to be just inactive members. Then it went through less active members. Now it's less engaged church member. Ryan, are you a less engaged church member? Is that accurate?
I am not engaged at all.
Okay, well, yeah, exactly. And there's in Mormonism, there's an obsession with having the same unified voice, and I really think that a lot of this goes back to President Nelson went through a lot of major rebranding. He renamed a lot of buildings, he renamed a lot of terms, and very famously, he disavowed the use of the term Mormon. And this has really percolated throughout all of Mormonism, is renaming all of the common terms and when they talk about prophetic insights, this is basically what you're going to get with Russell Nelson is local updates, tweaking some verbiage, and making some very, very minor policy updates. Nothing sweeping, nothing big, nothing general. Any last thoughts on this insider's view into how the Mormon church is trying to shape the narrative and the way that people in the church speak about others?
No, I just think it's funny that they're so focused on it. It tracks though.
Yeah, it does. Now, I saw this. This is kind of interesting here. We're going to talk over this a little bit here, but this was very interesting. We've seen some people in the world kind of mispronounce the name of the church here. The church doesn't want to be referred to as the Mormon church, but here in Africa, this is one of the first times, if you look at the actual heading here at the top, it says Church of Christ of Latter-day Saints commissions renovated school blocks in Africa. This is one of the first times I've seen Church of Christ of Latter-day Saints. And I think that I've also seen a number of times where the church has shortened the name to the Church of Jesus Christ and left off the Latter-day Saints. It seems like there's a shortening of the church's total, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is such a clunky mouthful. Do you think that the church is trying to see a renaming, a rebranding of itself? What do you think?
Well, they have been ever since Russell Nelson became prophet, and they've had a hard time doing so because he wants people to use the full name of the church, and yet it's a mouthful. That's why people use the term Mormon or the Mormon church. And so I've seen it in different news organizations, especially use one that kind of surprises me, the Church of the Latter-day Saints. I've seen that a few different places, the Church of the Latter-day Saints, and they just skip Jesus Christ altogether because they're like, okay, they don't want Mormon, but we want to identify the group of people, so it's the Church of the Latter-day Saints, because people generally know, not everyone knows Latter-day Saints as much as Mormon, but yeah, I think that's kind of a funny one to fight about, is trying to get rid of the nicknames when the church name itself is just way too long.
It definitely is way too long. Now, our next article here is from Rebecca Biblioteca here. Garment rationing has begun. It looks like the LDS Church is going to allow members to buy exactly 2 of the new tank top styles, and that's it. You're going to get 2, and that's it. Gone are the days where you could stock up on 30 or 40 pairs and then mark up the price and sell them. Or you have your parents or a mission in another country purchase multiple pairs for you. I'm not sure how they're going to gauge how many pairs you can buy, though. Could you go to a distribution center and buy 2 pairs at each location? I don't know. Perhaps they will check Temple recommends. Unknown. If you go to the Mormon Land podcast, this is where she's getting this information here. Beehive clothing, sleeveless LDS garments are getting harder to buy, even as U.S. rollout draws near here. And this is from Mormon Land, which, again, from the Salt Lake Tribune here, pretty reputable source here. Word is that the Utah-based Faith is now limiting members to 2 sets of each style at a time, if they can find them at all. How do you feel about the fact that it looks like we're going to be going through garment rationing?
It's not surprising. It's people have been screaming at the church to listen to women as far as the garments for many, many years. And it seems like maybe they're finally starting to figure out that maybe we should actually listen to the women, because it's the men who've been designing them and figuring out how and where to sell them, and the women generally haven't been involved at all in their own underwear production, as evidenced by all the complaints about what results from these different styles. And so when you finally come out with something that a woman would have designed, then it's gonna fly off the shelves and they're gonna have a hard time keeping it in stock.
I couldn't agree more. Now, jumping gears here, Fairview, Texas Temple. We will be giving you a couple of temple updates here. Collin County Court decision could determine the fate of the controversial proposed temple, which started off in McKinney and then was renamed the Fairview, Texas Temple, one of the church's most controversial structures here. And let's see what's going on.
Today, a big decision in Collin County could settle the future of a controversial temple project. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints wants to build a new temple in Fairview that's just south of McKinney. It's a plan that's been on the table for more than a year. It has divided neighbors on both sides of the issue. Janelle Forth live in Fairview right now. And Janelle, there has been a lot of back and forth on this.
Yeah, there really has. And tonight at 7:30, Town Hall will once again serve as another round, as a backdrop for another round of what's become one of the most contentious debates that the city of Fairview has ever seen. So at the heart of this is a proposed temple with a 120-foot spire right off of Stacy Road. The town council has already voted yes to move the project forward, but that vote is being challenged in court by residents who want to cap the height of the church. Residents who oppose the temple say the council's 5-2 decision back in April shouldn't have counted as approval. They argue it should have required a supermajority of 6 votes because of formal protests filed by nearby property owners. And the math here, it really matters. So the town says that just under 20% of neighbors who live within 200 feet of where they want to build a temple signed protest, which is not enough to trigger the stricter threshold. But opponents claim the town miscalculated by including a chunk of land that's technically in Allen and not Fairview. Their attorney argues that if you take that land out, the percentage climbs just over 21%, enough to require 6 council votes instead of 5. Now, that legal dispute is now sitting with a Collin County judge. On the other hand, the LDS Church says a new temple is needed to serve the growing North Texas congregation. But some neighbors and even the mayor argue the size and height of the proposed temple don't fit Fairview's small town character. So tonight's council meeting isn't about revoting on the permit itself, but the agenda does include approving the final plat of the temple site. And while that sounds technical, every step forward keeps this project moving or brings it to a halt. So there's a lot to follow here. Sending it back to you guys in the studio.
Okay, so Ryan, I know you've been following this over there on your famous TikTok channel. Is this Russell Nelson's world famous peacemaking in action in Fairview, Texas, where there's been multiple lawsuits, a lot of consternation, a lot of bad feelings, a lot of hurt feelings? And is this how we're supposed to prosecute a worldview, through litigation and threats of ruining a town through economic, the Kurt McConkie and others ruining a town through litigation?
I feel like I've said a few times already tonight that this doesn't surprise me, that doesn't surprise me, but this one in particular with the Fairview Temple does surprise me. Because of this image that they would like to portray, that they are the good guys, that they are the ones who send the planes full of humanitarian supplies to natural disaster sites. But then when there's this one temple in this one community where they obviously don't want it, at least don't want it, it's just the height. They're just fighting about that steeple. And it has been surprising that every step of the way, the church is willing to ruin their reputation, to make their reputation worse and worse, step by step. Like she says, every step of this process either moves it forward or just grinds it to a halt, and it keeps grinding to a halt because people are unhappy, and yet they still just continue to dig in their heels and use their religious freedom trump card over and over and over again, making people so angry.
Yeah, I'll push back on you just a touch. I would say, if I could speak on behalf of what I've heard from the people in Fairview, it's not that they don't want the temple. It's just that they don't want the temple in the residential area with that height. If you want the height
right.
of the temple, you could just move it literally 2.5 miles to the east, and then it's fine. Or you could have it in that neighborhood just a little shorter. So I wouldn't say that they don't want it. They just wanted to follow the law, which I think is a pretty reasonable request. Now, the
Yeah,
Fairview Temple, the new Fairview mayor here, John Hubbard, make a very direct statement to LDS Church as they approve the temple plat. Now, this is just an audio recording, but he's going to make a plea to the senior LDS leaders, who, by the way, are completely AWOL in this entire debacle, not weighing in whatsoever.
Here's my motion. The Fairview Temple should be a symbol of love and community, a place where neighbors come together in mutual respect. Instead, the Fairview Temple has become a symbol of division, bullying, and a refusal to be good neighbors. When the conditional use was approved, the council inadvertently left out the removal of 2 parking lot lights on the north side of the property. These lights shine directly into the homes of families living on Forest Oaks. The town reached out and asked the LDS Church if they would, out of the kindness and consideration for the people living next door, their neighbors, take the poles down. The church answered no. With the approved CUP, the LDS Church has every legal right to keep those lights, just as they have every legal right to build a 120-foot steeple. But having the legal right doesn't make it the right thing to do. A true neighbor doesn't ask, what can I get away with? A true neighbor asks, how can I live in harmony with the people around me? That's what makes this process for me so disappointing. Instead of being remembered as a place of peace and community, Fairview Temple, called the House of the Lord by members of the LDS Church, is at risk of being remembered as a place where rights are valued more than relationships, and where being a good neighbor was pushed aside. And included in that motion, I would like to make a motion that we approve the plat as presented.
Yes, and I believe that plat was approved. See, we're kind of far away. I'm in Washington, D.C. You're back in Utah. We're kind of far removed from this, but when you get down into the ground, this is still a very raw situation where the emotions are really right at the surface, both from members and non-members. This is an incredibly divisive temple. How do you feel about Mayor John Hubbard's remarks here?
that's a leader. That is true leadership, and that is how I would like to say that's my goal in talking about things like this, is being able to convey that sense of community and desire to work with, not against people. That was really admirable what he said. I wish we had more government leaders just like that. And I wish the church's highest leaders were listening, but we know they're not. This is all just a legal issue to them, and so it's their legal people who are handling it.
Yep, they have not shown up to do any type of on the ground communication with anyone that's associated with this. They sent their lawyers out and then they remain back in Utah in their ivory towers. That's disappointing. I
Yeah.
did like what the mayor said. Just because you have the legal right to do something doesn't make it right. Like, from a capital R right. And so it's a disappointing situation to be sure. And it looks like the church is going to get this over the finish line, just like it has with virtually every temple, with a couple of very minor exceptions that it has ever tried to push through, thanks to those our loophole laws and the other considerations. The United States in particular is a
It's
very
that
has
religious freedom trump
Right.
card. Yep. That they use
Yep, the
over and
religious
over again.
freedom. Now, another article, just real quick here. First edition of the Book of Mormon here, Ryan. Look at this. Sells for $250,000 at auction. I would not be surprised to see a Book of Mormon sell for $1 million in the next 10 years, says rare collector Reed Moon. This first edition of the Book of Mormon here, you can see here, bound using old traditional methods. This was a 592 first page edition here. This was kept by a single family here as kind of a family heirloom, and they decided that it was time to sell, and they seriously cashed in. That's a huge price tag for that rare edition of the Book of Mormon. I believe there's only just a few hundred of these things around. Are you surprised to see it go for that high of a price?
No, that's really cool. Whether you're active or ex believing, that is really cool. Like, I'm a bit of a history nerd, and I saw that headline and was a little bit jealous. I would never be able to spend that in 5 or 10 lifetimes, but
Yeah, it's
that's
amazing.
really cool.
If you go back to think about Martin Harris, he mortgaged a part of his farm for $5,000 to bring us the Book of
Should be
Mormon, and
so
the
proud.
Yeah, he just looking at now that it would be selling for $240,000. I don't think that he would ever have considered that when they were originally being sold for between $1.25 to $1.75. Now we're seeing them go for 240,000, or even the most rare copies of them that have, either penned from some of the early church leaders or others could go for $1 million. Those first editions are really something. That was quite an article here. Now, I'm not sure if you followed this, but this is very new stuff here on YouTube. We're seeing a change in how the church has bringing its content forth. The church has a couple of official YouTube channels. It has its main media account. It has Come Unto Christ. It has a general conference account. It has the church news. It has a few, but now they're adding new accounts on YouTube. I'm not sure if you're following this, but this is very interesting stuff. This is going to be brought to us by my favorite shill for the Mormon Corporation, Jasmine Rappley. Let's see what's going on.
Have you seen that every apostle now has their own YouTube channel? Right now, the only thing on all of these channels is a single original video and also a playlist with a compilation of clips from General Conference from the church's other channels. If I had to guess why they're doing this, it might be because the church would like to have a bigger voice in how the names of God's apostles are showing up in searches. But who knows? Maybe the apostles really want to step into being genuine content creators and posting original content targeted to specific audiences.
For instance, take a look here at Jeff Holland. This is just a couple of days ago here. He has 2 official videos. He already has 3,000 subscribers. That's not too shabby here, but he's only got 2 videos posted. But we're seeing the church enter.
Good morning or good afternoon. Good evening.
Sorry. I don't know where that sound is. Oh, sorry. It's
TikTok there. Okay.
I'm making. Oh, sorry about that. That TikTok was still going there. I'll edit that out. I'll smooth all that out. So we're seeing a difference here in how the church is trying to engage with people. Each of the apostles now has its own YouTube channel, and they're going to be more engaged. And Jeff Holland, we saw there, had 3,000 subscribers. He only has 2 videos up. How do you feel about the church entering the YouTube space a little bit more?
It's funny and kind of weird. I thought Jasmine's take on it was a little strange as well when she says maybe they're going to be like genuine content creators. There's no way in hell that they're going to do that. The church has long since passed the point of their upper leadership being willing to get on the ground with the commoners and actually engage with the people one-on-one without going through their immense filtering that they do, even for the apostles themselves.
Yeah, for sure. The apostles all have Instagram accounts. They all have Facebook accounts. They all have Twitter accounts. And what they typically do with these,
know that they have all those?
That's a good question. That's a good question. And what they typically do is they will make typically a very bland posting, typically once or twice a week, and then with absolutely no engagement with the people in the comment section whatsoever. It's just a drop and release on a schedule, and it's certainly nothing that has any type of individuality, any type of ministering, any type of reaching out to the lost sheep, any type of leadership whatsoever. It's really more of a PR marketing thing than it is really trying to preach the quote unquote gospel of Jesus Christ, if I can put it that way. Now, our featured news article here, Brian, is from the Wall Street Journal. This was absolutely huge. This was the #1 article of the week here. Wall Street Journal here. Ex-Mo influencers mount a TikTok war against the Mormon church. The church is facing a 21st century reckoning driven by social media, and it is racing to counter the narrative. And Alyssa Grenfell herself here, who is featured here, one of the biggest juggernauts in ex-Mormonism here, she said, "Today I sipped my coffee, read a great article in the Wall Street Journal, and celebrated 500,000 subscribers on YouTube." What are your first thoughts here about this Wall Street Journal article and what we've seen this week?
That was amazing to see. It's one of my first thoughts was the church itself has been trying and trying to control the narrative on social media and just on the internet in general. And the ex-Mormon community has effectively done what the church and their hundreds of billions of dollars cannot figure out how to do. And this Wall Street Journal article is evidence of that, and they don't like that.
Yeah, they don't. We're going to see that the church is going to respond to this article this week, which we know means that this was a big article because the church only wades into the biggest articles here. From the article itself here, let's just give you a snapshot of what it says. It says Mormons used to live in a tight tight-knit Latter-day Saint community quietly. Now they are finding a large and loud audience online. Quote, ex-Mormons used to be their own secret society, says Alyssa Grenfell in Texas, who started questioning her faith about 9 years ago and has more than 1 million followers across her social media accounts. To become public about this, it's like, oh my God, she went there. The 32-year-old posts about topics members of the faith prefer not to discuss publicly, such as events that occurred during baptisms, initiations, and other ceremonies in the temples they consider sacred. Some Mormons describe her content as cult porn that they believe ridicules their religion in an attempt to attract followers. Grenfell says she is trying to help others navigate their own decisions to leave the faith. Once among the world's fastest growing religions, Mormonism is facing a 21st century reckoning driven by social media influencers, and the church is racing to counter them. Let me just ask you this, Ryan. Is Alyssa Grenfell's content, which is controversial, is that cult porn?
I understand that. I think there's a little bit of both going on. That she is legitimately trying to help people who are navigating leaving the faith. She has a book that is an amazing book. It's on my bookshelf upstairs, not this one, but upstairs, and it's a great book to help people navigate that. At the same time, it looks like it's a career for her. So 500,000 followers, that's amazing. That's gonna pay her mortgage. So of course she's gonna want more followers, even if it's just to get people's attention, to get more views. There's nothing wrong with that, and she's doing a great job at it.
Yeah, her book, How to Leave the Mormon Church, here is a pretty big book out there. I have a review of that book on this channel, which is about 10 minutes long, if you're interested in that. Now, we're going to get a number of reactions to this big article here. We're going to start from faithful reactions. We're trying to give you all sides here on the Mormon News Roundup, fair and balanced, right? Maybe not.
That's right.
But are we losing to the anti-Mormon movement? This is from an account out there called Covenant Captures. Be still and know that he is God. There's a Wall Street Journal article, and let's get this take.
There's a Wall Street Journal. Trust him.
Ryan, I'm getting very, very fearful from watching this. What do you think?
I thought that other person you showed a few minutes ago said that Mormonism had the most compassionate version of Christianity. Now I hear that those angels are just waiting to come down and cut us down.
Gee whiz.
Just
So,
begging and pleading, please let me go cut them
my
down.
goodness, what the incongruity of the peaceful background with the angels who are waiting, by the way, for the second coming, which you're going to have your face melted off by the Mormon Jesus if you have not done what? Paid into the illegal
Paid your
clandestine
tithing.
hedge fund. You have to have paid
That's
into
right.
an illegal clandestine hedge fund in order to have those angels stay their hand. That is a bizarre litmus test, by the way. But getting to his bigger point, yes, this is a ridiculous take. I hadn't watched it all through, but that was a wild ride. Is the the so-called anti-Mormon movement, is it actually gaining ground? I think that's the fundamental question that he's trying to address. Is it true?
I think it is true, and the Wall Street Journal article does address that. Was it Alyssa, I believe, that was quoted as saying even just a few years ago, if you left the church, there were online communities, of which like the Ex-Mormon subreddit is one of the biggest, but you had to seek them out in order to join them. If you didn't know that they existed, you'd still just be alone in your journey leaving the church. But now anyone and everyone can just accidentally happen upon that Ex-Mormon content, such as with Alyssa's that goes super mega viral. It's amazing to me how many people are interested in Mormonism now. A lot of people, it's like we used to be what the general community of which I am still a member, used to be less, people didn't really know about us. You travel to the other side of the world and no one knows who Mormons are, even today. But within the United States, still, a lot of people just knew Mormons as these polygamists. They knew nothing about the current church. But now, more and more, partially thanks to social media, everyone knows who the Mormons are, where the Mormons are located, what are these scandalous stories that are happening with Mormons, what are these TV shows that are being made now because everyone knows who Mormons are and is more and more interested in them. So yeah, the movement is gaining speed for sure, I would say.
Yeah, Secret Lives of Mormon Wives is absolutely huge. I mean, had billions of minutes watched. Alyssa Grenfell's content has millions of hours watched every single month. And she does a fantastic job of making Mormonism accessible to people who are not at all familiar with the church. And that's not typically what I go for. It's just I don't like explaining things at the mundane level that she does. I kind of like I'm kind of hitting people at like a 10th grade level, and maybe she's at like more like an 8th grade level. I don't know. That's just my take. Now we have been kind of glossing over the more controversial aspect of this Wall Street Journal post, and this is what Alyssa here posted herself. She posted some behind the scenes pictures that did not make it into the Wall Street Journal here. These are a few shoots that didn't make it into the final piece. It was surreal, she said, to see the article land on the front page of the Thursday's print section, something I never imagined when I started sharing my story online about 2 years ago. She's certainly blown up here, but here's the more controversial pictures here, Ryan. And I want to get your take. Are these disrespectful pictures here? Because it shows Alyssa in the typical temple garb here with some of her missionary paraphernalia, and also and there's that book you talked about, How to Leave the Mormon Church. Is it disrespectful here for Alyssa to be posting these temple pictures, which many Latter-day Saints consider to be sacred?
That's an interesting question, because current active believing members of the church would say it is. And yet at the same time, now that I've been able to have years of taking a step back and getting a bigger perspective, my follow-up question would be, what other religion is like that, where they say, don't you dare let anyone else see our sacred clothing? Jews don't do that with I don't know the terms, with their hats. For example, that's one of those that anyone and everyone can just go buy one of those caps that they wear. But it doesn't matter what religion, it seems, they all just are not secretive. Whether it's sacred is a different question, but they're not secretive about it like Mormons are. So is it disrespectful? They would say it is, but I would argue it shouldn't be.
Okay. Now, here's what we saw from trending. This is from the Mormonish podcast here. The day that this came out here, just a couple of days ago on September 3rd, which is just a couple of days ago, the Wall Street Journal article about ex-Mormon influencers was trending number 3 online. This was a big article here. The next day, it was trending number 4 online, and it hit the print version of the Wall Street Journal below the fold. It's, there it is on the right-hand side. You can see it's below the fold. It's not on the front page, but it's below the fold. There are over 2,000 comments on the article so far. Interestingly, in the online version of the article, ex-Mormon influencer Alyssa Grenfell is shown in her LDS temple clothes. In the print article, that picture is missing. So the digital version was a little bit more explicit, if you will. It seems like the Wall Street Journal was not trying to ruffle as many feathers in the print version online. I find that to be very interesting here. Now, Jasmine is going to weigh in on the Wall Street Journal on Exmos here and give us a fantastic take. And I do say that tongue in cheek.
The Wall Street Journal just published a disrespectful photo of Sacred Temple clothing, and I was interviewed by the Wall Street Journal for this piece, several times in fact. Out of the whole article, this one line was the result. So here's the reality of what happens behind the scenes, and even the unethical line the paper was willing to cross in trying to craft this story. I was contacted about this story months ago. They said that they were interested in the Exmo social media phenomenon, fair enough, and they wanted to do a story on the Exmo Latter-day Saint social media space, respectfully representing both sides of the story, talking to a variety of Exmo and Latter-day Saint creators. During the interviews themselves, we talked about much more than what was included in the article, a lot of the positive aspects of the faith and the social media space right now. And of course, when talking in person, they were also far more complimentary than what ended up being published. And that I get. I understand journalists cast a wide net and then they have to be selective about the talking points that make it into the final story based on the goal of the piece. But the thing that disappointed me was that they tokenized real Latter-day Saint voices to feign balance while crossing what I feel like was a major ethical line. I don't know how this came about, but at some point, the Wall Street Journal decided to stage, shoot, and publish a photo of sacred temple clothing in what I feel like is an explicitly mocking way. What happens in temple ceremonies is very sacred. Displaying the temple clothing out in public on a person who is no longer authorized to wear them, it's demeaning and sacrilegious. In fact, the reporters went so far as to misrepresent to me that they were in communication with the church on this article, as if to imply church cooperation, when in reality, the church declined comment, and the Wall Street Journal proceeded to violate the sanctity of our most revered rights. I'm willing to extend the benefit of the doubt, maybe in so much exposure to Ex-Mo content, and since this reporter is not a religion reporter, she may have just been unaware of how disrespectful this was. So I just hope that in the future, the Wall Street Journal chooses to extend the same respect to my faith's sacred practices as they would to any other faith.
Okay, Jasmine is making the argument here, Ryan, that this was an unethical hit piece that was deceptive in its entire conception.
I can understand that perspective because I've been there. I would have been nodding right along to the whole thing more than 6 years ago. It's been 6 years since I left the church. But yeah, it just goes back to that same question of, is it actually disrespectful, or is that just what Mormons are told? I find it interesting, though, that she wanted to start not with the main points of the article or what it talks about, but the fact that it left her out of it. That seemed to be her biggest gripe.
That's funny, right? She led with the fact that she was in cahoots with them, but she only got a tiny little piece on that, and that definitely chagrined her. That's very astute observation. Very interesting. She says that the piece tokenized the faithful members of the church and explicitly mocks Mormonism and violated everything that she holds dear. Is that do you think that criticism is accurate? I mean, is that a valid criticism?
If you know Jasmine, that's not surprising, but no, it's not a valid criticism. I don't believe she habitually takes things just enough out of context to be able to magnify it to the degree that she needs to magnify it, but at the same time it's manipulated, so she pulls at your heartstrings, and so she had a great opportunity to do so here, because that active believing church members were a minor part of the quotes and people who were talked to, and but at the same time, the article wasn't about them. It was about the ex-Mormon influencers. So
Exactly.
why should we give 50% of the quotes to active Mormons when it's not about them?
Yeah, she has no problem in the church when women in the upper echelon of the church represent only 3% of the upper echelon. But in an article that is specifically about ex-Mormons online, she wants equal representation. That irony is pretty thick here. Now, Rebecca Biblioteca is going to give us her take here on this entire front page article here.
The Ex-Mormon influencer article that came out in the Wall Street Journal on September 3rd was trending all day at number 3. Today, it is on the front page of the print edition and still trending number 4 online. Interestingly, online, there was a picture of Alyssa Grenfell in her LDS Temple garments. That picture was not included in the print version that you see there on the screen. I've looked at the comments. There's over 2,200 on the online version, and a lot of them are asking for a retraction, saying it isn't accurate, and there have been some threats to cancel subscriptions. Either way you look at it, it is causing a lot of interest in the ex-Mormon influencers and the apologists, and this back and forth and what's happening in this world. Try to read the article if you can, either print or online.
Okay, real quick here. The actual title of the article is that influencers mount a TikTok war against the Mormon church. Now, your TikTok channel is a lot bigger than the Mormon News Roundup. So let me ask you, are you mounting a war against the Mormon church using your TikTok channel?
No, not at all. I market my material to people who have left the church or are in the process of leaving the church. It's not at all to pull people out of the church. And I would argue that the vast majority of ex-Mormon content creators that I know would say the same thing, that they're not trying to get people to leave the church. We're trying to establish community once we have left the church. And as with Alyssa Grenfell's account and content, other people are interested in the church, because active believing church members won't talk about the weird details of the temple, and yet people are interested in that. But it was my experience to go through the temple, and so it's my right to talk about my experience going through the temple. So that's what we did.
Makes sense. Now, the church did respond to this, and they did so in their typical fashion, which is to have an op-ed that's released through the Deseret News, which is the church-owned media outlet here. Typically, they're not going to confront this head-on with a senior Mormon leader. Instead, they're going to use their surrogates to try to shoot it down here. And this is what they said. The Wall Street Journal reported a Latter-day Saint 21st century reckoning. That's not what I see. While the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, like all faith tradition, is grappling to engage rising generations, there are so many reasons to be encouraged. And the gist of the response is this doesn't represent all Mormons, and it's disrespectful. And it's the typical line that you would get from the church here, which is, pay no attention to the Wall Street Journal. Lots of people love being members, and so should you. That's the basic summary of the Deseret News. Any thoughts on that one?
I thought that article was interesting because that's how I found out about the Wall Street Journal article in and of itself. I hadn't heard about it yet, and yet my Google News feed knows that I like to see updates on the church and what people are talking about. And so I saw that headline from Deseret News, and that piqued my interest. And so I read it and found out that, oh, there was this Wall Street Journal article that the world in general is talking about Mormons. And so anyway, so I thought that's funny that they fight back so hard against it, when if they would just totally ignore it and just let Wall Street Journal do what the Wall Street Journal is going to do, then the general membership of the church would be less likely to find out about it and be upset about it. And yet they market for the Wall Street Journal. Sure, church members might unsubscribe, but more people will subscribe than will unsubscribe because of content.
Well, if you, all I can say is, anyone who decides to unsubscribe from the Wall Street Journal, can you please subscribe to Ryan Josiah on TikTok and also the Mormon News Roundup? I think
That's
that's
right.
a fair. I think that's pretty
That's
fair.
right.
Now, what's amusing from this cover story here is this is the cover story here, and what we see is a bunch of people in the rain here. Audience members brave the rain as they make their way to an arena to listen to President Russell Nelson and others speak in Florida in 2019. What does that have to do with anything? Why are we showing a picture of somebody 6 years ago? And this is the reason that they chose this ridiculous picture here, as Rebecca once again points out. The Deseret News has a rebuttal to the Wall Street Journal article on ex-Mormon influencers, and the rebuttal is, members of the LDS Church love the church so much that they're willing to wait in terrible conditions to listen to their prophet. As thousands of members of the Church of Jesus Christ lined up, a sudden violent rainstorm erupted, but that did not stop them. They sat for hours under wet and windy skies just so that they would listen to their beloved prophet. This is your rebuttal to the ex-Mormonism in general, is to show some believers who are willing to wait up in the rain to listen to the prophet. I find that type of rebuttal to be deeply lacking. Alyssa Grenfell and others have serious issues about, whether it's women's equality, whether it's about racism, sexism, transphobia, all kinds of issues with the church. And you're going to say, well, some people really like it. That's the best that you have to offer. That's pretty disappointing, in my opinion.
It's not just some people really like it. It's that some people go so far as to prophet worship. Look at these people. They are practically worshiping this man. They will do anything to get in his presence. And I think active believing church members would understand that and say, oh yeah, that's because it's so good. And yet people who are removed from the faith, I think, might take it from a bit of a different direction and say, but why would you do that for one man instead of helping the world or doing service? We're just going out of our way to basically prophet worship.
Speaking of Renee, I know you appeared or going to appear shortly on Renee Steelman's She Became Visible podcast. Great episode. Everyone should check it out here. She's going to react also to the Wall Street Journal article here with about a 4-minute clip. Let's see what Renee's got going on.
Thank you for all the comments on my last post. I'll try and not use my indoctrinated primary voice. But I opened the Wall Street Journal today and saw the piece by Georgia Wells about ex-Mormon influencers. It's entitled, "Ex-Mo Influencers Mount a TikTok War Against the Mormon Church." I love that they use the title Mormon. By the way, you can sign up for a free trial and read the article before the paywall kicks in. Anyway, it felt like the paper had finally caught up to what many of us have been saying and living for years. The LDS Church is in a quiet but undeniable free fall. I've been telling my story on @GoGrayDame and @She Became Visible 513, not because I hate the church, but because truth matters. What the article captured and what I see every day online is that the glossy numbers and carefully curated PR image can't cover up the reality anymore. Membership may still be officially reported at over 17 million worldwide, but the number that really matters is activity, and only a fraction of those counted names actually show up. In the US, identification with Mormonism has been sliced in half since 2012, and that's not an accident. That's a hemorrhage. And why? Because the truth is available in ways it never was before. We were raised in a system that told us our questions were dangerous, that history was anti-Mormon lies, that doubt was a sin. But now a young person doesn't need to comb through dusty archives to see the cracks. They can open TikTok and hear a firsthand account of someone leaving after discovering polygamy wasn't just a fringe practice, or that church leaders taught racism doctrines well into living memory, or that billions are stockpiled in secret while families are told to sacrifice grocery money for tithing. What the Washington State Journal piece describes is a battle for influence. And it's true, the church is trying to flood social media with its own content creators, but there's no comparison. You can feel the difference between polished missionary videos and the raw honesty of someone telling how they were silenced after reporting abuse or how their mental health collapsed under purity culture. The truth resonates. It always will. For me, going public with my story meant losing the comfort of silence, but gaining the freedom of authenticity. It meant finding thousands of others who carried the same doubts, the same bruises, the same longing for integrity. And now the statistics are bearing it out. The church is not losing members because we're rebellious or lazy or have been deceived. It's losing because the truth is louder than the fear. I don't celebrate the decline of faith communities, but I do celebrate the rise of honesty, connection, and visibility. That's why I keep speaking, because every time another woman says she became visible, it chips at the shame and secrecy that kept us bound for so long. And oh, one last thing. I do take umbrage at Miss Wells describing Alyssa Grenfell's appeal as a contributor because of her bona fides, stating that she attended BYU and served a mission. The invisibility of women in my demographics began with our prophet telling us education was unnecessary and that, oh, well, I guess you can serve a mission, but not till you're 21, and your chances of marrying are slim to none. I had my first of 6 children when I was 21. Follow the prophet.
First, give us a quick take on that. Then I have a couple of specific questions to go along with Renee's take.
Well, beautifully said. I love how she worded all that because truth does matter. That's why I started my TikTok channel, because I left the church after finding out the truth about certain things that I felt like I should have known this as a believing member my whole life. And so then I had this insatiable hunger to learn more, and so I, for example, listened to the first 100 episodes of the Year of Polygamy podcast with Lindsay Hansen Park. All-time favorite podcast, cannot recommend it highly enough. And learned so many things, for example, from that I felt like people need to know this, and so I started my channel in order to learn to share what I'd learned about the history of polygamy in the church. That's where I got started, so I can really relate to that.
Yeah, one thing that I really notice is we've seen a couple of faithful reactions, a couple of ex-Mormon reactions. This particular article really divides down the line. It seems like ex-Mormons really like the article, and it seems like faithful Latter-day Saints really don't. And what I don't have a good sense for myself is how, if I can use the term here, non-members, nomos, people who have never been a member, how are they reacting to the article, do you suppose? Because it's hard for me to be able to gauge that. What's your gauge about how, forget members, forget ex-members, how do you think the general public is reacting to this particular article?
I would expect it's not a big article. It's not a huge topic of conversation. It made it on the front page, and that's significant because people are talking about the LDS Church enough that it would be worthy of being on the front page. But I can't imagine it's a huge topic of conversation outside of Mormon / ex-Mormon spaces.
I think you're right, as you almost always are. Now, David Snell over there from Keystone, formerly of the Saints, Saints Unscripted podcast, he is also going to weigh in. And spoiler alert, he doesn't like the article.
This has been a wild week for Latter-day Saints, and something just happened we've got to talk about. So a few days ago, the Wall Street Journal posted a really rough article about ex-mo TikTokers waging war on the church. I was actually quoted. Little did I know the article would turn out to be so disrespectful towards us. But then just today, just barely, Time Magazine published this article by none other than President Russell M. Nelson. The two articles are absolutely night and day. Somewhat ironically, President Nelson spends a good portion of his article imploring readers to, quote, love your neighbor and treat them with compassion and respect. Imagine how different our world could be if more of us were peacemakers, building bridges of understanding rather than walls of prejudice, especially with those who may see the world differently than we do. I assume it's probably just a coincidence that the Time article came out just on the heels of the Wall Street Journal article, but it sure makes for an incredible response.
Now, we are going to talk about that Time Magazine article here just in a moment. But is David Snell, is it right? Was the Wall Street Journal article disrespectful at its core?
I got a new pair of gloves today, but they are.
Was the Wall Street Journal article disrespectful at its core, and was it really rough on the church?
I mean, it was rough on the church because, like we've been saying, truth matters. And it spoke to the truth, or at least to people's experiences, because my truth is that I was lied to. I've, for example, been on multiple church history trips. I've been to all of the major church history sites twice, once with a youth group when I was 16 or 17, and once with my family in a motorhome, all the way from Utah to Vermont and back to visit just the church history sites. That's why we did it. And yet I knew so little about church history. And so, yeah, it's rough on the church for sure. But it's just because it's speaking truth to how the church operates, and it's not a pretty picture.
Speaking of that Time Magazine piece here, Russell Nelson, just a few days ago, September 5th, 2025, we all deserve dignity and respect. And this is a little snippet of it. It's not a long article here, but he said, "My faith teaches me that over 2 millennia ago, Jesus Christ preached these same laws of happiness to love God and to love our neighbor. After 101 years, I can say that these are not abstract theological ideas. They are practical wisdom. They are what have sustained me through loss and triumph, uncertainty, peace, war, and healing. If we embrace these eternal truths, honoring our own worth, treating others with dignity, and nurturing our families, our lives and our world will be steadier and more joyful. That is my birthday wish for all of us." Ryan, it is extraordinarily rare for, especially after the days of Gordon Hinckley, for any church leader to pen an op-ed that of any sort, of any kind. This is really an unprecedented time for Russell Nelson to be penning something like this. How do you feel about it?
It's rather remarkable, isn't it? He's turning 101 years old, and yet the church would have me believe that he has a YouTube account. He's writing editorials for Time magazine. He's doing all these things.
Writing books.
Writing books. I highly doubt all that. But at the same time, with what he said, it's do as we say, not as we do, right?
Yeah. This is our final video here. Jasmine's going to talk about this Time magazine piece here. She's going to summarize it.
Time magazine published an article by President Russell M. Nelson because at 101 years old, he has lived through over half of church history. He has lived through the telegram, the telephone, and is now living through TikTok. And through over 100 years of experience as both a heart surgeon and a global religious leader, what has he learned the most? A century of experience has taught me this. Anger never persuades, hostility never heals, contention never leads to lasting solutions. I've had a few hard lessons in this, and so in my own very limited experience, I have to say I agree with President Nelson. I tend to talk about controversial issues in the church a lot, so I'm not perfect at this, but I did need this message today, and I think President Nelson's right. So if you want to join me while we talk about challenging issues while trying to be a peacemaker at the same time, be sure to hit follow.
Be sure to hit follow on this particular channel while you're at it. Now, look, he has penned an op-ed here, Ryan. There's no doubt about that. But as you go back, when is the last time that Russell Nelson had a sit-down interview with a real journalist? I'm not talking about McKay Coppins, a Mormon stooge, or others. Has he ever spoken to a journalist at any time in a sit-down interview?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't
No.
think so, because
No.
those few times when that actually happens is the shit hits the fan, for for lack of a better way to say it. One of the first examples that comes to mind for me is when Jeff Holland was interviewed by someone from the BBC, and he was just directly asked, like, Mitt Romney at the time was running for president, and he made these covenants in the temple that he was willing to do certain things to himself if he ever, right? Did he do that? And Jeff Holland chose to lie about it first, and then was he knew the correct answer already, of course, so he confronted him and said no, but he did make those covenants, right? And anyway, so those few times when that has happened, it never turns out well, and so they just don't anymore.
Yeah, that was back in 2012 with Mr. Sweeney of the BBC. And there has not been a real sit down interview of a journal authority in any capacity since that time. That's been 13 years and counting. Now, Russell Nelson, when he did take over for when he very first took over in 2019, I believe it was in January, February, there was a press conference with the first presidency where he had a couple of questions from Peggy Fletcher Stack, but this was not a sit down, no holds bar interview. That's as close as we've ever gotten. So I find that to be very disappointing. Penning an op-ed is nice, but how about real interactions with people who can ask you a tough question and try to hold you account? He's never going to do anything like that. But as we mentioned earlier, it is his 101st birthday, which is why the hashtag President Nelson 101, that's trending. Wow, I wasn't aware of that. Let's see what Nemo the Mormon has to say about President Nelson's 101st birthday.
Everyone, stop what you're doing. The glorious leader is about to have a birthday. That's right, prepare yourselves for a week of hashtag Russell M. Nelson 101, a media campaign around the prophet's birthday, which was kicked off in fine form by Ronald A. Rasband and Dan H. Oakes, who were apparently so keen to celebrate our beloved prophet's birthday that they both said today was Russell M. Nelson's birthday when in fact it isn't for another 7 days at the time of recording. This was particularly amusing given how Dallin H. Oaks' post talked about him and Nelson being friends of some 41 years. Now, these posts have been edited to correct those claims, and it was probably just a simple mistake. But I will be keeping a close eye on this next week of Russell M. Nelson-related content, and so be sure to give me a follow so you don't miss anything.
Are you surprised at all that a couple of the apostles got just a little ahead of their skis in wishing President Nelson a happy birthday?
I am surprised because of how well correlated everything in the church is and how many filters everything goes through. And so that is a rather surprising slip there. Even I know Russell Nelson's birthday because I have an annual birthday post that I have this creation that I made in honor of his birthday. So I repost it every year on September 9th. I know that day now.
Very nice. We'll be looking forward to that. That does take us to our final segment here, Ryan, which is the Mormon News Roundup Joke of the Week. And I believe that you have that for us.
Yeah, this is more Christianity, but I came across this joke that said, what do you call it when Batman skips church? Christian Bale.
Okay, very, very nice. Now, over there on your TikTok page, if you visit your TikTok page, what are you going to find? What projects are you working on? How can people get in touch with you?
Get in touch with me, just messaging me on TikTok. I've opened that up to anyone and everyone to message me. I don't really have any specific projects that I'm working on. I generally just kind of like yourself. I follow the news and talk about it, and then just talk about other things that is on my mind or that people are talking about, and including other things like Utah politics, since I'm in Utah. And yeah, just if you want to follow more Mormon news and other just random thoughts about Mormonism, give me a follow.
Definitely worth your time out there. Hey, I want to thank those people out there who support the Mormon News Roundup on a Patreon. That's Scab, Bob, RMW, David, Blaine, and especially Sophronia. Thank you so much. And a YouTube membership, Emrak, Chris, Starla, Jeff, and Lee. Thanks so much for joining Thanks so much for supporting the program. Ryan, thank you so much for ruminating with me on the Great and Spacious Beehive. I really appreciate you joining the program.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been fun as usual.
Okay, I always think celestial, and remember.
No unhallowed hand can stop the Mormon News Roundup from progressing.
When it comes to nicknames of the church, such as LDS Church, the Mormon Church, to remove the Lord's name from the Lord's church is a major victory for Satan.
Satan.